Historical Materialism by Maurice Cornforth. Chapter 3, Part 2, The Active Role of Ideas in Social Development. Materialism teaches that the ideas which are formed in men's mind depend upon the prior existence of material things and material relationships. But this does not mean that, having arisen on the basis of material conditions, ideas play no part in the social activity whereby material conditions are changed. On the contrary, having arisen on the basis of material conditions, ideas become an active force reacting upon material conditions. We must distinguish, therefore, the question of the origin of ideas from the question of their significance and social role. The third guiding principle of historical materialism deals with the role which ideas play in social development. It states that ideas which arise on the basis of conditions of material life of society themselves play an active role in the development of the material life of society. Some types of mechanistic materialism stress only that ideas are called forth by external material conditions. But having said that, the mechanists pay no more attention to the further active relationships which arise between ideas and the material conditions which called them forth. Dialectical materialism, on the other hand, which is concerned to study things in their complex interrelationships and in their real movement, must take into account also the ways in which ideas react back upon the material conditions, and the role which ideas play in the total complex movement of society. Let us consider, for example, a skilled workman engaged in production. He is not an automaton. He possesses knowledge, that is to say, ideas about the materials of his trade. These ideas have not come into his mind from nowhere. A carpenter has ideas about the properties of wood, and a toolmaker has ideas about the property of metal, and his ideas are the reflection in his mind of the properties of external material objects, wood or metal, which he has come to know in the course of his practical use of them. These ideas of his originated in his mind as reflections of external material things and as a result of his productive activity. But having been formed in his mind, they are then a factor, and an indispensable one, in determining his productive activity, in which he shapes and changes the wood or metal in conformity to his ideas about it and about what can be done with it. People do not work without ideas. Indeed, when primitive man made his first stone implements, he was already demonstrating the role played by ideas in man's activity of changing his conditions of material life. What is true of labor is true of social activity in general. People do not carry out their social activity without ideas. The ideas which arise in their heads are in their origin determined by their material activity arising from the conditions of material life of society. Possessing these ideas, men undertake activities which react back upon and change the conditions of material life. Thus the ideas which become current in society are formed in men's brains as a consequence of and as a reflection of their material activity and the conditions of material life. Men's social activity takes place on the basis of given conditions of material life. These conditions are reflected in ideas in men's brains, and with these ideas, men then carry out social activity reacting back upon the conditions of material life. Everything which sets men in motion must go through their minds, wrote Engels, but what form it will take in their mind will depend very much upon the circumstances. We have already remarked that certain mechanistic materialists see only that ideas are called forth in the brain through the influence of external material conditions. They do not see the active role which ideas then play in human activity to change external reality. Idealists, on the other hand, are one-sided in the opposite sense. They see only the ideas, disregarding the material conditions from which they take their origin, and then stress the active role which ideas play in human life. They separate ideas even from the brain in which they are formed, regard them as separate existences, and as the first cause of everything men do. Dialectical materialism, in opposition to idealism, sees how ideas arise in the brain only as reflections of given material conditions. But it does not the less see also the role which ideas play in the human activity of changing material conditions. It does not follow, wrote Stalin, that social ideas, theories, political views, and political institutions are of no significance in the life of society, that they do not reciprocally affect social being, the development of the material conditions of the life of society. As regards the significance of social ideas, theories, views, and political institutions, as regards their role in history, historical materialism, far from denying them, stresses the role and importance of these factors in the life of society and its history. New ideas and old. In relation to social development, ideas play one or the other of two roles. Either they promote or hinder the development of society. They are either progressive or reactionary. It is characteristic of social ideas that, having arisen on the basis of the development of given conditions of material life, they tend to continue in existence, even after the conditions which gave rise to them have disappeared, or are in the process of disappearance. In other words, there is a tendency for ideas to lag. This tendency may be observed also in individuals. Here is an example. Let us take a shoemaker who owned a tiny workshop, but who, unable to withstand the competition of the big shoe manufacturers, closed his workshop and took a job at a shoe factory. He went to work at the factory not with a view to become a permanent wage worker, but with the object of saving up some money, of accumulating a little capital to enable him to reopen his workshop. As you see, the position of this shoemaker is already proletarian, but his consciousness is still non-proletarian. It is thoroughly petit bourgeois. In other words, this shoemaker has already lost his petit bourgeois position. It is gone, but his petit bourgeois consciousness has not yet gone. It has lagged behind his actual position. Even today, in some factories, there are people who still suffer from this lag in consciousness. But the individualistic, petit bourgeois ideas, which may have been very useful to a small trader in trying to run his business, are not at all beneficial to the wage worker. They prevent him from combining with his fellow workers. Ideas arising out of old conditions of existence, but continuing their influence when those old conditions are already demolished or ripe for demolition, thus come to act as a reactionary, conservative force, hindering the new, progressive developments in society. The struggle to organize a factory, for example, may involve a struggle to supplant the old, small capitalist ideas in the minds of some workers, which prevent them from combining against the employers by new working-class ideas. It is the same when the fight against the employers has placed power in the hands of the working class. Even when capitalist exploitation has been abolished, the struggle to build a new socialist society involves the struggle to eliminate the remnants of capitalism in the minds of men, for ideas born of the capitalist social relations lag on, even after those social relations have ceased to exist. Old ideas, reflecting social conditions dating from the past which have become outmoded, serve the forces which are striving to preserve the old social conditions, and hamper the forces which are striving to bring new social conditions into being. It is therefore the reactionary classes which champion such ideas, strive to keep them alive by dressing them up in new forms and adapting them to the needs and demands of the current struggle, and propagate them in every way and by every means in their power. The progressive class, on the other hand, needs to combat such ideas, destroy their influence, and develop their own new ideas corresponding to the new social tasks. In class society, therefore, Ideas reflect the standpoints and tendencies of different classes. The class struggle is waged also by means of ideas. So, in the sphere of ideas, reflecting the class struggle in all its complexity, there occur periods of apparent quiescence and periods of open conflict, victories and defeats, alliances and splits, compromises, maneuvers, and struggles for positions of leadership. In the battle of ideas, in fact, the whole battle to change society is fought out. Ideas are always a potent force in society. Hence, when we speak of the battle of ideas, it should never be supposed that we are referring merely to some task of a minority of intellectuals who are carrying on controversies in the higher ideological spheres of philosophy, religion, science, or art. We shall examine in the third volume how such higher ideology arises and what is its significance. The fundamental work of the battle of ideas, however, is being carried on by everyone who recruits a non-unionist into a trade union or a new member into the Communist Party, who argues against and exposes current capitalist propaganda or combats right-wing labor ideas which represent capitalist influence in the labor movement. The social role of ideas can, then, be summed up by saying that while old ideas, based on the material conditions of the past, hamper the progressive development of society and are championed by the reactionary classes, new ideas, based on what is new in the development of the material life of society and on the needs of that development, are championed by the progressive classes and actively assist the progressive development of society. New social ideas and theories, wrote Stalin, arise only after the development of the material life of society has set new tasks before society. But once they have arisen, they become a most potent force which facilitates the carrying out of the new tasks set by the development of the material life of society, a force which facilitates the progress of society. It is precisely here that the tremendous organizing, mobilizing, and transforming value of new ideas, new theories, new political views, and new political institutions manifests itself. Such ideas and theories are indispensable if the new tasks set before society by the development of material life are to be fulfilled. People cannot act effectively without ideas. Thus, new social ideas and theories arise precisely because they are necessary to society, because it is impossible to carry out the urgent tasks of development of the material life of society without their organizing, mobilizing, and transforming action. Arising out of the new tasks set by the development of the material life of society, the new social ideas and theories force their way through, become the possession of the masses, mobilize and organize them against the moribund forces of society, and thus facilitate the overthrow of these forces which hamper the development of the material life of society. When such new ideas, generally put forward in the first place by a few people only, have indeed become the possession of the masses, when, because these ideas correspond to their material needs, the masses have made them their own, then ideas become an invincible force. Theory becomes a material force as soon as it has gripped the masses.